Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres. If this is the first time you tune in, you'll want to know that this is the most followed consumer goods and retail leaders podcast with 25,000 followers on LinkedIn. Sorry, I said podcast in Europe because we are a part of a family of podcasts. We have a sister podcast in the US called the CPG Guys that have, I think, 38,000 followers on LinkedIn. So we're not globally the first, but European-wise we are, and we've been interviewing FMCG and retail leaders since 2020 and counting. So do go into our website, fmcgguys.com. You'll find plenty of other leaders that have been on the podcast. And you won't be disappointed, I think. And if you have heard us before, welcome again. And we're off for another very good conversation today, I think, because we'll be talking about a very hot topic in the industry today, which is marketing, and a topic that I like a lot, which is food. So what could be wrong? What could go wrong with that? So we're accompanied by no other than Chris Doe, who's the Marketing and Innovation Director for the UK at Pilgrim Europe. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hey, Daniel. Yeah, really good. Thanks. Really nice to be here.
Thanks for joining me. And first of all, I wanted to ask you, what does it mean to be the UK in Marketing and Innovation Director at Pilgrims?
Yeah, I think I've got a really, really lovely job, actually. I always count myself to be really lucky. So I guess my remit is to have end-to-end ownership of the UK brands portfolio at Pilgrims Europe. So that spans our power brands, which are Richmond, Refrigerators and Mattisons, and then what we call our heritage brands as well, which are very iconic, very nostalgic brands, which are hugely important to people up and down the country. So we have strategy, innovation, comms, pack design, in-store execution, all sitting within me and my team. So it's a lovely kind of full end-to-end remit I get to hold.
Fantastic. That is something I'll ask you more about briefly, but I wanted to ask you first. My background is in recruitment, as I was telling you before. And in recruitment, there's this saying that you don't choose to go into recruitment, you fall into recruitment, which is actually what happened to me. Not that that's a bad thing in my case. But how did you fall into FMCG? Because you're an FMCG guy through and through, no?
Yeah, that's right. I've been in FMCG for 15 years, and I've worked around quite a few different companies and categories during that time. But yeah, do you know, it was a long fall, to use the fall analysis. I think I can trace it all the way back to when I was about 15. And I don't know about you, but when you're 15, you're trying to choose subjects to study. It's quite difficult. And I remember just being presented with this choice around different subjects to take. And I had no idea what I wanted to do, to be perfectly honest. And I chose business studies as one of them. I figured at some point I wanted to work in a business. Therefore, it probably made sense to study it. So business studies felt fairly logical. And that was probably about the extent of my thinking behind it, to be perfectly honest, as a 15-year-old. And it was an interesting start because I spent the first term learning about things like remittance advice slips, invoicing, and it was just...
business force, finance, that type of
It was hard.
Yeah.
And I probably spent the first couple of months thinking, what on earth have I done? This is awful. And I was really close to quitting it, actually. And I came back after the half term or whatever. And the subject that was after that was marketing. And suddenly I was like, this is what I was hoping for. I didn't really know what I wanted from it, but I was like, this is what I imagined business to be, which was all about understanding consumers, how to drive demand, how to come up with product propositions, packaging, advertising. And it was almost like all the stars aligned. So I was like, this is what I imagined business to be. And this is what I kind of signed up for. And we were really lucky actually at my school because we had something called Young Enterprise, which was running at the same time. It's a fantastic scheme, which is still going today up and down the country. And it allows students age 16 in kind of sixth form college years to come up with their own business and to have a go at turning a profit for 9 to 12 months. And I signed up for that, and I was the marketing director on that scheme. And it was a fascinating 9 months. I mean, it was a real learning curve, because there's a group of us having to run our own business age 16 and come up with different product ideas, speak to students around the school to find out what they wanted.
It was a fictional business, though.
No, we were a registered company, and we were turning a profit. It's a fantastic scheme, which still exists today. It's really cool.
What company did you start?
So our company was called Streamline, and it was exactly what you'd imagine a student business to be. We were selling all kinds of things. We were selling badges. We were selling iPod cases. Basically, we were very opportunistic. We got better as the time went on, but it was a bit of a mishmash of different things. But it was great. I spent 9 months putting that marketing theory into practice as a 17-year-old, doing a bit of research, putting some things out there, seeing what worked, refining it. And then we had to produce a company report at the end. And that was probably what really solidified my love for marketing, because I could see the direct impact you could make on people.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm sure that, as you said, solidified what you were learning on theory when you practice it, because it's like a project, if you like. You learn better than just learning the theory. And as we say here, vomiting it on the exam, no?
Exactly. And I learned tons from that, and it made me realize I wanted to move into marketing. So I went and did a degree in marketing for a couple of years and really enjoyed the subject. And I came out of there even more confident that's what I wanted to do. But again, I don't know about you, but you come out of university and you've kind of been equipped with all this theory and all this knowledge, but then it's kind of hard working out, so what does that actually look like in the real world? And again, I had some ideas in my head about what I wanted to do, but I couldn't quite define that, really clearly. And I remember coming across a job advert for, I think it was like a marketing assistant job at a company called Henkel. And I read the job description. I was like, that's it. That is describing all the things I want to do. And I applied, and I was lucky enough to get in there. And I spent about 18 months at Henkel. And I think it's interesting because coming into the world of work, it's so different to everything that you've had leading up to that point. You almost have to unlearn quite a lot of behaviors and mindsets that you have at school and university. So that first year was really pivotal. And it was a great kind of learning experience.
So much more fun for me personally as well to work than to study. Personally, I've always enjoyed it much more. And on top of it, I get paid, right? Which is also nice.
Yeah, the money definitely helps.
Do you also in Henkel, you did a sales role, no? As well?
That's right. Yeah. So I originally signed up to do a marketing role there. And about a week before I started, I got a call to say, actually, how do you feel about moving into sales? It's like, I don't know.
What are you going to say? They offered you a job, you're not going to turn it down, are you, right?
There was a bit of that, yeah. It was at the height of the banking crisis as well. So I'd come out as a fresh graduate. I got first, and I naively thought I could walk into any role. And actually, it was a real struggle. So, as you say, it was a choice I had to make. But I thought, it's a foot in the door. It's a big company. And, whatever I do there, it will be a positive experience. So I threw myself into this sales role for a year. I was really lucky. I had a fantastic boss who I would call a friend now. And he really took me under his wing for that first year and showed me how the world of work worked. And I got to go and speak to customers. I got to go out into the field, see how things worked in reality. But I was always very clear I wanted to move into marketing at the end of that experience. And I was fortunate. The business facilitated me to do that move. And I think I went into marketing way better equipped than if I just gone into it straight from university, because I suddenly had that sales experience, that real life, out of the coalface exposure, which I was then able to bring into my marketing role.
And then you did a marketing role, and the rest is history, because since then, practically all your roles have been in marketing. I mean, I know that you did a commercial strategy role as well, like revenue management for a project, actually. And then now you're doing innovation as well, but you have obviously stayed in marketing in hindsight, why do you think you stayed in marketing? Because a lot of people, they study marketing and then they try sales and they prefer sales. Actually, you were mentioning that you listened to the Stephanie Lilly episode, and that's one thing she said, right? She wanted to do marketing really badly, but then she discovered sales and she really liked sales. But in your case, it was the opposite.
Yeah, we're the complete inverse. So yeah, I was really clear I wanted to work in marketing. It's kind of where my passion had been, as I say, since I was 15 or 16. And I think for me, it's the fact that it's always evolving. You've got new things constantly coming out, whether that's technology, agency models, the consumer landscape is constantly changing. So there's always something new and different for you to learn and move into. I think that would be point one. I think point two is the fact that I don't believe there's any other role that sits quite as centrally in the business as marketing does. We get to touch absolutely every single function. And I love the idea of being a general manager for the part of the business that I work on. The fact we get to interface with the sales team, category team, R&D, the manufacturing sites, you get to touch the whole lot. And I've never been what you would call a fluffy marketeer. I've always been quite commercially oriented. And I've always liked the idea of running a business. And I believe that marketing is a great function to equip you to run a business in the future, because it's all about driving demand and it's all about driving growth.
What is I think the way that you're describing it is that you're running marketing but with a GM mindset, let's say. But of course, you're not the one doing the sales. How is your how do you influence that commercial team to get out there and sell more from your marketing seat?
I mean, it all comes down to relationships. So I've got a great relationship with my counterpart in sales. We meet very regularly as a leadership team and talk about the challenges. So it's about, I think, building shared empathy and about understanding where the other side is coming from the whole time. And I've never been one to operate in a silo. I've never been one to think, well, this is a marketing problem and therefore I'm not going to get involved in anything else. And I don't believe other functions should either. I think you get the best results by getting everyone's brains on a problem and talk things through and to get to the best possible outcome. So I've always tried to build that shared empathy with the sales function and try and immerse myself in their world and try and talk in their language as well. As I say, try not to be a fluffy marketeer and talk in jargon and talk about things that are quite abstract. I think it's about turning what you're doing, which can be quite theoretical at times, into something that is actionable and is going to resonate with buyers at the end of the day.
So how did you manage to stay true to yourself? Because you've seen a lot of other marketers be more like the classic marketer, fluffy if you like, or more like using jargon. How have you managed to, now being a director, I think is different with experience with through your growth trajectory.
Yeah. I think if I look back at the start of my career, probably the advice I'd give to myself would be to be more confident in the skills that I can bring and the strengths I can offer. I think when I first entered the marketing world and probably the commercial world more generally, I was surrounded by very extroverted people who perhaps shot from the hip a little bit more, and were, going into, they were kind of going into action very quickly. And I probably tried to emulate that to a large extent, because ultimately you want to fit in and you see other people doing well, and therefore you feel like that's something that you also need to do. I realized very early on that I was a bit more introverted. I was someone who was perhaps a bit more considered. I liked thinking a bit more critically, and I was quite analytically minded. Mm-hmm. And I think when I first started my career, I shied away from that and tried to hide some of that stuff because that wasn't what I saw from maybe other people in the function. And as soon as I embraced it and got comfortable with that being who I was, what I uniquely brought to the table, I felt happier in myself. I felt more confident in my ability. And I also saw the benefits of that play out in my work and also in the interactions that I was having with other people. So I think owning that and recognizing the unique skill that you bring to the table is critical. And I think that then kind of snowballed from there, really.
Totally. And when you come to think about it, most CEOs are introverts, right? So you're probably in the right side of things. I'm, as an extrovert, I have to admit that. So there you go. And I'm curious to know what attracted you. So after being you mentioned Henkel, Burton's, Bird's Eye, General Mills, very recognizable companies. Now you're at Pilgrim's, which you joined in 2019. What attracted you about the company originally?
Yes, I joined the business when it was still part of Kerry Foods.
Oh,
so we've been through an acquisition process during that time in which Pilgrim's bought the part of the business that I was in from Kerry Foods. But I'd say that a lot of the ethos has remained the same. When I joined, it was funny. I almost didn't go to the interview. I had a really bad cold that day. And I remember being halfway to the train station and just thinking, I feel awful. I'm really not going to be at my best today. Maybe I'll just turn around and go home. And for some reason, I kept going and I still went to the interview. And I'm so pleased that I did, because the people that I met were just fantastic, really inspirational leaders. And the people that I then subsequently met throughout the process just blew me away with the level of ambition that they had, the level of openness, humility and authenticity. I just really warmed to the people. And I was really excited about what the business was doing at the time as well. And it was one of those moments where after every single stage in that interview process, I wanted the job more. And I went from, as I say, almost going home battling this cold to suddenly thinking, I really, really want this, and really threw myself into it. The things that I always come back to, it's a head and heart decision with a lot of this stuff. The people that I met really appealed to my heart, in the sense that I could really see myself working alongside these people and doing good things with them. But equally, my head said this was a really good place to go as well. For me, it was a place that was somewhere that gave you tons of ownership. And I felt that through the whole process. There's no European or global team. Everything sat locally for you to drive. And that meant everything from strategy through to innovation, comms, packaging, execution. You own everything. And that's something that's always been really important to me. And you have to take the rough with the smooth. When things are going well, you can take credit for that. When things are going badly, you also have to take credit for that. And it means you have to have that feeling of, right, this is now for me to fix and I need to step in and deliver on that. So that was something that really shone through to me through that interview process. And it's still something that I see today. We give a lot of ownership to everyone in the organization. It's not very hierarchical. And as a result, even if you join on the graduate scheme, I've got someone in my team at the moment who's a graduate, and what she's working on, you would not ordinarily get to work on in businesses of our size. So for me, ownership was something that came through loud and clear. I think linked to that, ambition was also something that I just saw in abundance. This was a business that was going places and it wanted to stretch beyond what it was doing in that moment. And some of the stuff that we were talking about in that interview process just gave me a real sense that they weren't satisfied with where they were. They were hungry to do more. And I saw that right from day one when I came into the business. We built a £30 million meat-free business on Richmond from scratch. We became the fourth biggest player in a matter of years. So it was a real hunger to move beyond just what we were doing today and to evolve the business model and to constantly jump on trends. That was really interesting to me. And then the final thing I'd say, Daniel, was there was this ability to make an impact. I saw that, as I say, it wasn't hierarchical. It was somewhere you could roll your sleeves up and it was whatever you wanted to make it, which was really appealing. I made a TV ad within 3 months of joining. And I was like, whoa, this is a pace and an agility that I've just never experienced before. But it was almost like, well, you've got an idea? Cool, we agree with that. Go make it happen. And that was really exciting to me.
Yeah. And that's a part of one of the advantages, if you take it, of being lean is that you can give your employees that superior impact. But it's everything. It takes effort, it takes consistency, it takes trust, right?
It does. And it's a two-way street as well. As I say, I think we offer a lot of empowerment and a lot of accountability to people in our teams, but equally we expect that back as well. And I think if people are ambitious and hungry and want to push themselves into these slightly more challenging spaces, then we will absolutely give them that runway. So it's absolutely a two-way street in my mind.
Yeah, totally. And clearly your intuitions and your first sensations in the first months that you were there have they've proven right in time, because within 5 years, you've done 3 different roles: manager, controller, and now director. So that's clearly the signs of a good move. Can you tell me more about like the company and the brand portfolio? I was actually unaware that it was like the former Kerry branded foods portfolio.
Yeah, so the part of the business I was in, as I say, was sold to Pilgrims in 2021. And it was all about establishing a real foothold in brands. So I look after the UK branded side of things. And our brands include Richmond Sausages, Frid Raiders, Mattisons, Walls, Mr. Brains, Lawson's. We've got a real plethora of brands. And what's really interesting about them is that they are all incredibly complementary. So it's a 300 million portfolio at retail sales, and they occupy different parts of the store. They play in different categories, different consumers, different stages of their journey. So it's a really interesting mix of brands, because the way that you treat all of them have to be quite different. The way that I think about the portfolio is in terms of power brands and heritage brands. And that's really intentional language, because the power brands get a disproportionate amount of our marketing investment, our people's energy, and our innovation and comms focus, because we believe that they are advantaged and that we've got tons more road to go after on those brands. So that's a really intentional choice. For me, strategy is about deciding not what to do as well as what to do. So we've said that is where we're going to focus our energy. We then have a portfolio of heritage brands, which are still really important, and they still deliver big numbers for us, but they're much more commercially focused, and that requires a very different skill set. So,
and when you say commercially focused, what does that mean exactly?
So that's much more, what's the promotional plan behind it, distribution, and making sure that they're operating in a very competitive way.
Okay.
So we segment the portfolio in those 2 ways, and it's really paid off. The power brands have grown 75% over the past 6 years.
Well,
they've grown at a CAGR of about 10%. So just consistently growing year on year, which for brands of this size and scale is I'm really proud of that, actually. And I think
in this day and age, it's not a given, is it?
No, it's not. And don't get me wrong, it's hard at times. And, you have to we've got really, really big ambitions, and we've got a really strong focus on growth. So you've got to constantly think creatively about where you're going to find the next avenues of growth. But that's, for me, what's probably kept me here so long. It's that constant idea of things are changing. You've got to seek out new avenues. And we've done some really good things on the brands. Our whole focus has been around making them more available, whether that be physically available or mentally available.
And if we had to describe the brand, I mean, I'll put a link to the company website so anyone listening can check the show notes and go into it. But the common thread is that it's all like, how would you say it? Ready to eat foods, or not ready to, or like how would you call it?
Yeah, I'd say they're convenient meal solutions.
Okay.
If I had to put them under one banner, and they primarily sit within proteins. So whether that be meat snacking, or plant-based, that's probably how I would categorize the portfolio. But we operate across both chilled and frozen temperature states.
How is this category? Like, how would you describe it? As someone that's worked also in other categories or as a marketer, what are the category dynamics? Because, of these categories, there's some well-known players, but not that many. No, I feel like it's quite a fragmented space. Or maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's a really interesting space, I think, from a brand marketing point of view. And again, this is probably what keeps things interesting and keeps things challenging. So if you look at the categories that we play in, sausages are in growth, meat snacking is in growth. So these are categories which have got latent consumer demand behind them. I think what makes the sausage category quite interesting for us is the fact that it's very private label focused. So there's a lot of private label players out there. And that makes my job really interesting, because you've suddenly got to try and make the brand really cut through that, and to give consumers as many reasons as you can for them to choose you over some of the competitors. And it's about giving people more of a reason beyond just price to buy into you. So we've been spending a lot of time actually over the past few years trying to dial up the emotional benefits on Richmond, to say, actually, this is a brand that helps bring people together. It creates a sense of belonging. bonds people over good food, with the people that they love. That's a really nice emotional space for us to move into as a brand. And that's really where we've been focusing our efforts.
Yeah.
I'd say that meat snacking is almost like the younger sibling to that absolute monster category that we're playing with Richmond, in the sense that it's slightly younger, it's growing at a really, really significant rate, and it's constantly evolving. And I think with that, it's about how we educate consumers. As I say, it's quite a new category. It's quite a new behavior for consumers. And therefore, the job to be done there is very different.
And what are your solutions for snacking?
So we have fridge raiders in that category, which are chicken-based snacks.
Yeah. Like
really convenient products. We've got them at the back of store for lunch boxes and more planned occasions. And then we've also got them at front of store in the meal deal, for example. So you can buy them with a sandwich and a drink.
Yeah. No, and what you were saying now, private label, of course, now I'm thinking properly. I don't always think properly, Chris. That's the problem. And it's a very commoditized, it could be a very commoditized category, in comparison to dry food or laundry and so on. So it can be very interesting as well to have a brand in that commoditized space.
Exactly, yeah.
I guess you have to rethink how you do it.
How,
when you look at the consumers in foods, and you were in food before as well with General Mills, Bird's Eye, what's been the evolution of consumers? Because I think that there's some trends that kind of healthier solutions, etc., which have been called a trend. For me, they're more like a cliche. If you had to say it, what are the big trends that you're seeing with consumers?
I mean, at the moment, the economic situation is probably a big challenge for the food industry in general. There's obviously a lot of pressure on consumer spending. Consumer confidence is really damaged at the moment, partly driven by the high levels of inflation that we're seeing, still above the government target. And that's as a result putting a lot of pressure on people's household expenditure. So I think that's probably been a real challenge for the industry over the past couple of years, where you're having to fight that much harder to get consumers to choose you over other products that are out there. And also choice is increasing as well. You look at what's happening in the QSR market. You've got a lot of new players entering that space, offering very competitive lunchtime solutions. So not only are we competing within grocery, we're also competing with some of the other options that are appealing to consumers beyond the grocery store as well. So I think you've got this downward pressure on pricing, but then you've also got this breadth of choice as well, which makes it that much more important for you to cut through as a brand and to give people reasons to buy you over other things.
How do you because now I think that more than ever, this is more and more data points that you can get more and more insights. How do you manage that data influx and all these insights and kind of think clearly and take a vision and take decisions on the way that you go to market after that?
Yeah, I think I'm probably a bit more data oriented in my approach anyway. So that might sway my answer to some extent. But I think the honest answer is it depends very much on the situation and the level of risk involved. So there are definitely situations where you can operate with less data. So where it's something that is more time sensitive, where there's less risk, then I definitely think you can use your intuition a bit more. And that's not to say just run into it blindly and just purely use your judgment. I think it always helps to have some data points and some jumping off point for you to form an opinion on the back of. But I think you can probably take a few more risks in those situations. For me, whenever there is a large level of investment involved, that is where the data side of me really kicks in. And that could be something like creative production, it could be media value, it could be CapEx. But I think whenever there is investment involved, that's for me where you have to take more of a data-led approach, because I'm under no illusions. Me and my team are running fairly significant budgets. We're talking about multi-millions of pounds here. Yeah. It's one of the biggest investments that the business makes. So therefore, I take it really seriously. And I have a real sense of responsibility, I believe, to spend that money in a really considered, measured way, and to make sure that every pound that we spend is going to deliver a return. So in those situations, I would lean more towards data because I think it helps minimize the risk and it helps build your credibility as a leader and as a function to build the credibility that you're spending this money in the best way. And also, we're not the consumer. That's the other point on this. So we need data in order to be confident that what we're doing is going to resonate with consumers. But there is a balance to that. Because purely taking a data-led approach, I think just sucks all of the magic and the sparkle out of the work that you're doing. And the way to overcome that, and the way that we've tried to approach this in our business, is to take more of a little and often approach. I think if you're testing regularly as you go through the creative development process on advertising or the innovation process, you can use your intuition and you can quickly validate your hypotheses with data so that you still keep that magic and sparkle and that gut feel alive, but in a way that is a bit more measured and you know you're on the right tracks. The worst thing to do, I believe, is to get to the end of that process, then test it and realize it's not going to work, because then you've just burn time and money on something that isn't going to deliver results. So little and often is the way that I try and balance my intuition and data-led approach.
You think that AI is making your job, in terms of like specifically around the data and insights interpretation, is it making your job any easier?
Yes and no. I think it is, in the sense that you can get to insights quicker and in a more cost-effective way. I think no, in the sense that it adds more into the mix. So I think there is then always that temptation to, let's just test this again. Let's maybe fiddle with this. So I think it gives you the ability to do more. And therefore there's a danger that you could end up just testing the life out of something. So it's striking a balance, I think, with the testing that you do.
Are there any like use cases you can share of AI that you're doing now?
Yeah, I think we use it a lot on comms development, where it's just quite a good way of putting it into a database, understanding how it benches against other competitor activity, understanding how it ranks against industry norms, and then using that as a bit of a case study to understand whether that's going to work.
Yeah, I think it's like, I mean, a bit what we were saying, no, that will be like the challenge, not to find like the right balance of using AI, but also not using it too much, that instead of like, as you said, have an intuition and confirm hypothesis, to start everything with data and like kind of outsource your brain in part, no?
Totally. And I think it undermines the creativity which humans innately bring. I don't believe that AI can get to as creative a solution as an agency can, for example. I think it's very good at supplementing the human thinking, and it's very good at maybe validating some of the hypotheses that you've got, but I don't think it can replace just some of the intuitive spark that people can offer.
Yeah, I was wondering the other day if like it will be like a value proposition for agencies in the future, that they'll say like AI-free brainstorming and stuff like that. I mean, I do wonder if that will be a claim. If anyone is listening to it, you can take that for free, but give me credit for it at least later. What about, that's another, I mean, because we're talking about like import insights and so on. What about like the way that you communicate your brand? You know, there's currently this debate between brand building and performance marketing. Do you believe in the difference between them?
I definitely think there's a role for long and short term activity on a brand. And we definitely approach that through a innovation and a comms lens. So if I look at comms, for example, I would say that we run what I would classify master brand activity at points during the year, where that talks about the emotional benefits of the brand and it elevates above the individual products. For me, that's the thing that is going to win in the long term, because it transcends products and it transcends categories. So that's the thing that is true across everything that you do on the brand, and it's the positioning communicated at scale. But we supplement that with more product-focused campaigns through the year to make sure that we're really clear on the functional reasons to believe that underpin the master brand activity. And, at the end of the day, it's imperative for MPD to land quickly and to build awareness and trial quickly, because retailers are becoming far more scrutinizing of performance in the short term. So we need to make sure that we've got really strong product-led activity pulsed through the year that talks about that MPD, and even our core as well, to be honest. So those two things work hand in hand. It's master brand activity plus MPD and product focused work from a comms point of view. From an innovation point of view, we have different classifications of MPD. We have big bet MPD, which is there to be a strategic platform. It addresses big consumer penetration barriers within the category. And that's where we put a lot of your kind of time and energy and money to make sure that that's successful. But at the same time, you also want some new news. So we spend a lot of thinking there on EPD launches, which are more like line extensions, flavors, limited editions, and so on, so that you've constantly got a stream of new news in the category as well. So that's probably a mix of short-term attention driving stuff at fixture, plus more of the big bet strategic MPD, which is going to be there in years to come.
Yeah, I like the EPD, which I guess is existing product development. Is that what it means?
Yeah.
That's super important, I've heard, like for brands, because I think that isn't it kind of best practice to like invest much more in EPD than in NPD? Like in iterations of your current brands and the new like product development?
I think it depends. We've definitely seen benefits of both. I would say that the big bet strategic MPD is great if you're trying to address a big consumer barrier and enter a new need state or occasion. And that, I think, is how you drive penetration on the brand and how you appeal to more consumers. But the EPD is really important because it helps keep things fresh and interesting at the fixture. It helps make the brand feel contemporary and modern and tap into consumer trends. So I think that's where things like limited edition flavors can come in, because you tap into something that's very on trend for the moment. It might not be in 3 years' time. And that's fine because you replace it with something else. So it just means that the brand isn't getting tired and dusty. You've constantly got a stream of things to keep your existing consumers interested and buying into the brand.
Yeah. By the way, how are you leveraging retail media? Because that's a big hot topic in our industry. So
yeah, it's a really important part of the mix, and we use it. I think it comes back to the jobs to be done on the brand, and particularly for things like MPD, where you need to cut through a very cluttered fixture. You need to make sure that you stand out at the point of purchase. That's where something like retail media is absolutely invaluable, because it allows you to really pop at the fixture and communicate the benefits of that MPD and just, I guess, reassure people and make people feel comfortable to take a risk on something which they maybe haven't seen before.
Yeah. I mean, and do you think it's really, since you're involved in sales as well, do you see it that as a change of dynamic between retailers and brands?
Not really. I think it's something that always would have been part of our thinking in terms of how we go to market. I think it's probably just been given a new name. And I think certainly for the businesses that I've worked in, retailer media or shopper marketing or trade marketing, whatever you want to call it, has always been part of the go-to-market plan.
Yeah, that's true. All in all, like with how do you feel like the business world has changed since you started working 15 years ago?
Yeah. So, I've always been very intentional about the types of businesses I've worked for. I've been lucky enough to work for some fantastic organizations, and that's allowed me to work across a breadth of different categories, whether that's biscuits, frozen food, wild foods, meat, fish and poultry, plant-based, different operating models. So whether that's multinationals, local structures, or different ownership structures. So I've worked for private equity and I've also worked for publicly traded businesses. And I think each of those are given very different lessons and experiences, which I still draw upon today. I think Burton's Biscuit Company was probably the best training ground I could have had as a new marketeer in the industry. It taught me so much, and I constantly refer back to the lessons that I learned there. But the one thing that really stood out to me was the power of leadership. I was lucky enough to work for a fantastic boss in my time there who was incredibly selfless, incredibly comfortable in his own skin, and was therefore able to push me into situations which I don't think some of my peers would have got to experience, actually. And I counted myself very lucky, even at the time. So he was really comfortable shining the spotlight on me, pushing me into forums that was super uncomfortable. And at the time, it was really challenging, actually. And I learned so much as a result of that. There was one situation where we went in to a board meeting, had to ask for £1 million worth of CapEx to unlock a manufacturing solution. And about a week before, he was also very last minute. So about a week before, he said to me, I guess you're going to present that, right? I was like, what, £1 million of CapEx to the board? And he was like, yeah, you'll be fine. Just cover these couple of points and it'll be fine. And honestly, I had so many sleepless nights in the lead up to that, thinking, I'm a newly promoted, 22-year-old brand manager. Who am I to go in and ask for that? But it was the best experience I could have got, because it made me work really hard on the preparation, getting my story straight, understanding what I was talking about. And we went in and we got £1 million signed off. And that feeling coming out of it, I was walking on air. And that just built my confidence, and it showed me that I could do some of that stuff. And I owe him an awful lot, because he was comfortable enough in his own leadership ability to not be the person in the face of that. He very firmly put the spotlight on me in that moment. So I'm incredibly grateful for that.
Yeah, credit to him. I mean, it takes confidence as well on his side to give the 22-year-old new brand manager that exposure as well. And there's a lot of praise about bad managers, but it's good that you underline what impact a good manager can have. I mean, I think that you can learn a lot of things from both good and bad managers, but to that point, now that you're a leader, what do you look for when you hire marketing people, actually?
Good question. I come back to three key things, actually, regardless of the level and regardless of where they sit in the organization. I come back to three main things. One is ownership. That's something that our business in particular is very keen on, and it's one of our corporate values. But really, I want someone who's going to come in, roll their sleeves up, get stuck in. It's a bit of a cliche, but I want them to treat the brand like it's their own business and spot opportunities, identify risk, and then do whatever they can to close those things down. And I want someone who is going to be a self-starter and really want to move the business forward. So ownership is a really big thing for me. Secondly, curiosity. I think as marketeers, we should be naturally curious, because we are the voice of the consumer in the business. No one else is playing that role apart from us. And therefore, we have to stay on top of different consumer trends, what our consumers are looking for, and take an interest in how that stuff then might apply to what we're doing in our business. But I think it's also, we were talking about it earlier in terms of building empathy with the sales team and other functions. That curiosity is also really critical internally, because you've got to understand what pressure points exist for other functions. You need to have a curiosity around what's happening in the broader business. I want someone who's going to come in and not just work in a silo on their brand. I want them to feel like I'm connected to something bigger, and I understand how the role that I play fits into what the overall business is trying to do. Because I think if you do that, you have a then desire to learn and do better and to improve yourself and develop. So yeah, seeking other people's perspectives, curious about how you can take that into your world is really critical. And then the final thing I'd look for is just around optimism. Again, I think as marketeers, we are the function who are defining the future. And you need to inspire people to follow you into the unknown in a lot of instances. We're talking about innovation and comms, which don't yet exist. And you have to be comfortable, I think, around that stuff is tangible, and it's easy for people to see that stuff and have an opinion on it. And you've got to have the belief that what you're doing is right, and the optimism that what you're doing is going to deliver a better outcome for the business in the long term. And that you have to sometimes overcome cynicism. You have to overcome criticism. And that requires you to sometimes dig deep and have that optimism that you are moving to a better place and inspire people to follow you, because that's contagious. If you inspire that in other people, they will want to work on it, and they will therefore drive your brand forward. So they're the three critical things. And when I've seen that work really well, it's almost like a virtuous circle.
Yeah, I think ownership and curiosity kind of come together, because the ownership makes you, if you treat your brand like your own business, you will automatically should be curious and be asking other departments and so on. But I like the optimism part. And the fact of the matter is that probably people that are smart are normally critical thinkers, and you can become cynical and like, because, there's a lot to become cynical about, but it's part of like being self-aware and yeah, I love that point.
Build allies around you, because as you say, it is easy to sometimes get cynical, and I think everyone needs a bit of an outlet, and I think you need to have a group of allies, a sense of camaraderie, so that you can open up and you can express when things are challenged or not working in the way that you want to. But I think outwardly, how you then portray that sense of optimism and instill a sense of belief is really critical, because I think if you're then outwardly displaying that frustration or cynicism, then that is also contagious in absolutely the wrong way.
Oh, it's so toxic as well for the office environment. So this wouldn't be a regular FMCG Guys episode. Well, it's not a regular one. I always say that. I always say it and then say the opposite thing, because every episode is different. But it wouldn't be an FMCG Guys episode without our famous last question. You actually gave one piece of advice already to your younger self before. Give me another one. Like, looking back, what would you say? What would you tell yourself from what you've learned?
I think I, early on, was obsessed about titles. And I believed that getting the next title and the next promotion would make me better. I believed that my success was contingent on the title that I held. And actually, I think if you front into chasing experiences instead, it makes you a way more rounded leader. And it gives you more credibility then when you step into the next role. And that doesn't necessarily mean a new title each time. It can just be about expanding your remit. It can be about working on different projects. And if you focus instead on picking those different things off and understanding, well, where are some of my gaps? How might I therefore close some of those? It then makes you more powerful in your approach, I think, around the next leadership move that you make.
Totally. So, Chris, I'm going to try quickly to summarize our conversation. I won't say everything because there was a lot. So if anyone wants to go back, you have to re-listen to the episode. But yeah, I liked the fact how you fell into marketing was a great story, and doing that business course in school. But yeah, ultimately you did some stuff that you were not that interested in, but it probably paid off later to understand that a business is not only marketing, but there's an actual backbone to it. The fact that what interested you about Kerry Foods, now Pilgrims, when you interviewed back in the day, you mentioned a lot of things. You mentioned a bit the brands, but more than anything, it was the culture, it was the ownership, the ambition, which I think is something very interesting, because I think that, and you clearly didn't, which is great, but a lot of people over-index the power and the affinity they have to a brand. And that is like an illusion, because you can have an amazing brand that you like as a consumer, but then if it may not have the right culture. And there's a lot of brands that are doing maybe very well in a specific moment in time, but they're not necessarily a great place to work. I like the separation that you have between power brands and heritage brand. I thought it was a very interesting way to divide your portfolio in a category that we don't know that much about in branded FMCG, because it is pretty commoditized. Every country has their local players. So I think that it's an interesting one, yours, to see it as like how a branded product can fit in that category. We talked about trends, which we talked mainly about economic situation, consumer spending, and confidence. So that's interesting. I think, as I pointed, it debunks a lot of thinking and a lot of praise that other trends have, which are legitimate. But if we're talking business, I don't think they're that important. Data, you talked about sometimes when you're in a time-sensitive situation, you can't rely so much on data. But when it's a large level of investment, you have to look at it. But you did talk about a certain process of intuition and then confirming that hypothesis with data. We also talked about the difference between brand building and performance. And you said, yeah, there's a clear separation about like brand building long-term and then performance for short-term activities, such as like seasonal occasions for existing products, or especially when there's an NPD. I think from what you were saying, it's important to get the ball running quickly, because if not, you can get delisted very quickly if the retailer doesn't see sales. We talked about like the importance of retail media, which for you was very clear. And ultimately, if anyone is interviewing with you when they're listening to this podcast, which they should do, you look for ownership, curiosity, and optimism when interviewing people and looking for the next generation of marketing leaders. Chris, this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining. It was a pleasure. And I'll leave your not your contact details, your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, so if anyone wants to learn more about you. There you go. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys every Wednesday and every Saturday. Have a great one.